Hello, in this video we're going to take a look at three different Gibson Falcon amps from the 1960s. The Falcon's also known as the GA-19RVT. They had a few different iterations of the Falcon and of all their amps for that matter in the 1960s. This is going to give us a look at three different Crestline era amplifiers. The Crestline era was from about 1960, late 1962, I think, up until about late 1965, and then for the 1966 model year, they changed their cosmetics altogether. But this is going to give us a look at three different Falcons. The Falcon was one of their best sellers, if not their best seller, of the 1960s. I believe that to be the case. They sold more of this amp than just about any other amp they made. The reason being it was a good sounding amp, had 12-inch speaker from the factory, had good volume for its size, and competed pretty well with the other amps on the market. That said, there are some improvements that can be made to the Falcon. In this video we're going to go through some of those improvements on one of these amplifiers. We will actually take a look at the guts of two of them. We're going to follow the modification of the one on the end here. This is the latest one. I have these arranged actually from the earliest to the latest, and these probably aren't more than a year or a year and a half apart, but look at all the different cosmetics they used. They used a brown grill cloth here. Then they moved to this silvery kind of stuff, like a salt and pepper silver. And then they moved over here finally to what's more of almost a wheat or a beige kind of a grill cloth. Also, there's a difference between logos. You'll see over here, they're all three silver, but this one has a brown backing, piece of plastic backing the logo. These have black backing for the logos, which make them pop out just a bit more. Let's see, what else? Cosmetically, that's about it. Oh, no, that's not it, because we also have Tolex. In the earliest version, it's kind of a tree bark sort of a Tolex, and you can see this one's been subjected to some less than ideal conditions. These are steel chassis, and if you store them, in a garage or something, this is what's probably going to happen as moisture collects. But you can see here, this is kind of a tree bark sort of texture. And then they moved to this sort of texture with the black, and this is also sort of a brown. The last one here is also sort of a black. As far as serial numbers, this first one, serial number begins with 774864 on the serial for that one. This one is a 777963. And finally, this one belongs to a customer, but the beginning of the serial number is 778. So I do have these arranged in more or less chromatic. I do have them arranged more or less from oldest to newest. So what we're going to do in this video, again, we're going to take a look at the conversion, or I say conversion, but modification process of this one. This one has also been modified, and we'll take a look at the guts of it. This middle one has not been modified. So this is going to afford us an opportunity to compare the tone of the modified and the unmodified versions of the Gibson Falcon. So if that's something that you'd like to see and listen to, stick around. Okay, it's that time again. We're going to take a look at some schematics. So it's time for half of my audience, I'm sure, to zone out completely. First of all, here on the left, we're taking a look at the earlier version of the GA-19RVT Falcon. This version had a 7199 in V2 position. Here, let me get something to point so I don't have to put my fat fingers in the video. Had a 7199 in the V2 position. The V2 position was solely in the reverb section, driving, first of all, the transformer, and then it was had the pentode section of the 7199 on the uptake. So that's a difference between the new version. This was, or I say new, I mean still from the 60s, but the newer version. the Crestline version, if you will. This one had a 6EU7 in the V2 position and a 6C4. Now the 6C4 was just a single triode, and I think they were probably saving some money because those triode Pinto tubes like the 7199 were kind of expensive. But they chose to go half a V3 here on the driver side of the reverb, and then just a triode from V2 on the uptake. So actually the V3, that is the 6C4 right there. So that's the whole of the 6C4. But what we're mainly concerned with are these tone sucking networks. I call them that just because this is something that Gibson put in later in the 60s, and I think what they were trying to attempt to do with most of their amps by putting these in here is to kind of clean the amps up so that they didn't break up. They wanted to keep them twangy. I think they thought they were going for the twangy Nashville sound or something. I'm not really sure. But I mean, half of the Nashville musicians don't like this either, so I don't know. I think they may have realized their mistake, or if they didn't realize their mistake, it might have been too late, because pretty soon after these 60s amps were made, they pretty much stopped making amps altogether for the most part. So yeah, if this is indeed in this example that we have in front of us, it's going to come out. The rest of this tone stack is pretty much the same in the old one. You can see here's the big empty space. Or excuse me, actually here's the empty space. We go through an O2 coupling cap into our little tone network here. Actually, this is I think this one is the volume for the it's the volume for the reverb section, and then we have the other volume there going into the next stage. We also have a couple of other differences. This first tube, this V1 tube, is biased differently. This is a 2.7K on the bias. The newer version has a 4.7K, so they've changed the load line on this tube probably a little bit. Or actually, that may not be the case, because what they've done also is they've changed the plate resistor. This one's a 470K, whereas the old one was a 220K. So yeah, this one's going to see more voltage, and they've biased it accordingly. This one is going to see a little bit less voltage on this plate, and again they've biased it, I'm guessing, accordingly. They have a .001 microfarad cap here, which is a little bit, this is a little bit bigger one here, and I'm guessing what they're doing with this one is allowing more highs through to the next stage, and then they're allowing more highs still with this 500 picofarad cap, just sending them straight through, and filtering off some bass, I guess. But since this one has none of that, they can get away with this .02, and it probably sounds pretty darn good, I would say. And actually, I know that to be the case, because I've heard some of these older Falcons, and yeah, they're good sounding amps. And I've heard these Falcons, these later ones that we're working on now, can be great too, with just a couple little mods, that's what we're going to do now. Okay, here we are with the back off this thing, and we can see the owner has done a few things to try to beef up the output of this amplifier, including changing the speaker to a warehouse speaker. This is their G12C/S, 8 ohms, 75 watts. Looks like a pretty nice speaker. These are made in Paducah, Kentucky, my home state. The chassis looks really clean. Everything actually looks really clean. He's actually changed the output tubes to a pair of JJs. It looks like they were matched at the tube store. Got a couple transformers we can date this with. 24th week of 1965 on this one. This one is it's going to be real hard to see, but it is about the 28th week of 1965. And this transformer, we can't see the code because it's on this other side. But we have a 6EU7, 6EU7, 6C4, 6EU7, pair of 6V6s. And this is a GZ34, also known as the 5AR4. And this is a Chinese rectifier, but that should be okay. Comes with a foot switch. He does have the panel covering, but let's get this thing out of here. This again is a pretty clean example. Let's pull it out and see how clean it is on the inside. You know, while we're in here, before we get this chassis out, I just wanted to point something else out. The next time you hear somebody knock Gibson amps from the 1960s, show them this video, because I mean, look here. This is real plywood. This is not junk wood. This is actually looks like birch plywood, and it's pretty darn thick. That's what the cabinet's built out of, and also it's finger jointed. Also, the baffle itself is made out of solid, or well, not solid, but it is plywood. So, you know, this is a well-made amplifier. This is not, it's not made out of junk. It's not made out of chipboard or pressboard or anything like that. The only thing that is made out of chipboard is the back door, which, you know, they saved a couple bucks, I guess, on this back door. But other than that, this cabinet is very well constructed. The chassis is made of steel, good gauge of steel. It's made to last. So, you know, next time you hear someone knock Gibson amps and the quality of the 1960s, show them this video and remind them what kind of build quality these amps are, because you just don't see this very much today, if at all. And when you do see it, you're going to really pay through the nose for something that's boutique built. Okay, we're getting our first glimpse inside this example of the GA-19RVT Falcon, and we can see here it's definitely been worked on. Someone, first of all, has changed a few of the caps, and kind of, I don't know. I mean, I'm just gonna be nice and say that this is not good. The reason it's not good, we have wires. Well, the first reason is this is an old cap can. This cap can is a General Electric cap can. I haven't seen the date codes, but it's probably from at least the 60s or 70s itself. So not a real good choice if we're talking about electrolytics. If you're going to replace electrolytics, replace them with new ones. You may as well. Second of all, we have a wire running pretty much to almost the length of the entire chassis, coming over here to this point. The other problem is kind of complicated. If we look at the schematic for the GA-19, we'll see here we have a 20 microfarad here, this guy, and that's our first one that should come off and go to ground. That's the first one that comes off of pin 2. And that's the only one. You know, we should go through a dropping resistor and then to the next one and so forth. You know, resistor and then the next one. But this one has whatever's in this can at this lug. So it's got that parallel with a 33 microfarad, which is coming off the same spot, going to ground. And to top it off, we have this wire coming down here to this one, to this old ancient thing, which is probably an original one for this amp. So we have this one also still hooked up. So we have 3 caps actually in parallel, none of which are probably doing this amp many favors. Maybe this Nichicon would be appropriate. It's 400 volts though, and I'm not sure if 400 volts is really going to cut it. Let me look at what the old one was. Let's see down here. The old ones were 450 volts. And I think that's probably going to see 450 volts. Maybe that's why they left it in. They thought, oh, this volt rating is not good enough. Well, the problem is it's none of this is going to be good enough. So we're going to undo all of this. They've gotten this in here with some silicone and some... and there's actually a wire. This is all wired up as well. This is not original either. They put this here to strap this down. So we're just going to get all of this stuff out of here. We're going to get this old cap out of here. We'll take this Nichicon out and actually do a proper cap job on this first of all. Second of all, we'll come in here and do some modifications, and we'll talk about those modifications as well here. Okay, we removed this this big cap can, and looky here. General Electric, it's got several caps in there, but 188, which is General Electric, 1964, 50th week of 1964. So, you know, replaced caps from 1965, or I guess this is about a 1965 amp. Yep, 1965 amp with a 1964 cap can. So not doing yourself many favors there. And also the location where it was, look at that, there's your inputs right there. So it was right by the inputs, and not only that, but it was grounded at the input lug, so you had all your power stuff grounded right there with your input. So that's not particularly great either. So we're going to do this a little more properly now, but yeah, I just wanted to show you that. I mean, that's the sort of thing, if you're not used to working on amps, you know, that's a mistake that you might make, but that's a rookie mistake, and that's one we're going to rectify here. Okay, here's something else weird. On the output of the 6v6s, we have, here's the old 20 microfarad going to ground here. So that's your bypass cap for the bias of the 6v6s, and then here's your bias resistor, but they've come in here and tacked this thing on too, which looks like a 40. So you got a 40 microfarad in parallel with a 20. I mean, just all kinds of weirdness going on. It's like they put this in and didn't realize. I mean, you're best taking this out if you're going to put a new one in. So I'm going to get rid of this one too. We're throwing values off all over the place here. Okay, we replaced this wire right here, this red one running from way over here to this pot. Reason being, this is the old wire, and it was half exposed. The reason it was half exposed is because over in this area is where our tone sucking network usually sits, and it's already been removed by a previous tech. So the same guy who probably I think did this stuff already removed it. So that's one less thing we had to do, but it also means I can't really show you what the network looks like. Now, essentially, I think by this time they were using this little network in one component. So it looks like a big cap, but it has 3 legs. One of the legs goes here, one here, and I think one somewhere else. But I may have a picture of it. If I have a photograph of it, we can take a look at that now. If not, we'll just move along. Here's another example of a Gibson Falcon GA-19RVT. This one still has the original Sprague Atom caps, electrolytic caps. It also, well, it's entirely original. I think I might be the first person in here. You can see here is the 3-legged component that I was talking about, and this, I think, if I'm not mistaken, contains all of the components from the tone sucking network. So that's what one of them looks like. If you get one of these, it's really best to get this out of here and run the screen wire. You'll have to extend the screen wire, but run this screen wire to this leg and just run it directly there, and bypassing all this stuff. A lot of people will actually desolder this component and leave it hanging in here, which, I mean, you can. But this essentially needs to be taken out because it's not really doing your tone any favors. And these other few components, we're going to go ahead and replace in this one as well. And actually, I have 3 of these amps, so I'm going to do 3 of these at once and just knock them all out. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention we're also through with our cap job now. Here are our 2 10s. Here are our 2 20s that the later schematic called for. I'm just going to, when in doubt, usually, especially on stuff like power, just go with the stock values, and I'm going with the stock values of the later GA-19RVT model. Okay, I was just getting ready. Okay, I was just getting ready to bring this thing up on a Variac and test it out for the first time, and also see if all of our filter caps and everything are okay. But you know, before I did that, I wanted to check the fuse, and as happens so many times with fuses, this thing is a 3 amp, and the amp calls for a 1 amp fuse. So it's like a constant battle with the wrong fuses. But anyway, yeah, always, if you're checking out an old amp, working on an old amp, whatever, or even on, if you've been using your amp for years, go check it right now and make sure that it has the correct fuse in it, because if it doesn't have the correct fuse, you really are putting your power transformer at risk. You know, as I always say, it's your choice. You can replace a 50-cent fuse or replace a $150 transformer. Okay, made a few changes here. Changed this bypass cap from a 20 to a 50. That is on the first stage, so that is this guy right here. This cap here is the coupling cap, which I went ahead and changed to a 0.02 like in the original design of this amplifier. This was already removed, so we didn't have to worry about that. This was a 0.01 in this design. Now on the older one, it was a little larger. I think it was a 0.0. Either that's a 0.02 or that's just a 2 microfarad. But at any rate, I've gone ahead and made it a 20. So what I did basically was took the 20 from here and moved it over to this position. And then I also changed this coupling cap to a 0.0047 from what it was a 500 picofarad, which is passing a lot of highs. So we've beefed up bass. We've changed the cutoff point for the bass frequency response for V1. We have blocked a little bit of highs by bumping up this bypass cap. This actually will, removing this or not having this in the amp will actually beef up signal moving through, because a lot of signal is actually being bled to ground by this network in the stock version. Over on V2, we've also moved the bass frequency response cutoff point more toward the bass end by going with a 20. We've also blocked some more highs by changing this to a 0047. Basically, we made it 5 times larger, or actually even larger than that, I believe. But yeah, my math brain's not on right now. But at any rate, I think this is going to do the trick, and let's give it a listen. Before we give it a listen, one more thing I forgot. This bypass cap on the output, I changed it from a 20 to a 50 microfarad. Someone had already changed it to a 100 microfarad. Actually, the cap that I pointed out before, which was in this position, it was 100, not a 40 like I thought. So, you know, it's probably just introducing some really subhuman level hearing lows into the mix there that's not really doing any favors. So I changed it to a 50. I think with 6v6s, that's probably about as low as we're going to be able to hear. So that should do us right. So I think with all these changes, we're going to have a pretty great amp. So let's give it a listen. Okay, for this comparison, I'm going to use a Fender Stratocaster. I'm going to leave all the knobs all the way up on it. On the original version of the amplifier, the unmodded version, I'm going to turn the loudness about halfway up, tones about halfway up, reverb's about halfway up. We will test that eventually. And the tremolo depth is all the way up with the frequency halfway up. We'll start with this amplifier, move to the modded versions, and listen to the difference. That's with my Controls are exactly the same. So we got reverb on there. Once again, the unmodded version, same controls are the same exact place. So not really a bad sounding amp, but not a lot of volume, not a lot of bass. And in comparison to the modified version, it's really night and day. Let's try another modified version. This later one is that the speaker was changed out for a warehouse 12-inch speaker, so this does not have the original speaker. And right now, frankly, it sounds a bit tight. It's not broken in yet. These two have the original speakers still. So let's check this one out one more time on the bridge position. That's how thin that is and just not present. One more time, modified version, bridge position. Now this one has the original speaker. Once again, I believe it's a Gibson. So let's listen to the modified versions, the Gibson original speaker against a new warehouse speaker. That's a 75 watter. Okay. That is a new speaker than the original speaker. The original speaker is nice and worn in. It's reproducing a lot more of the high-end content, a lot more mids. We're getting out of that speaker. This one is still tight. It's fat. It's fresh from the factory, and actually, you know, it's higher wattage as well. So it just got a much darker sound than the original speaker. I think of the three right now, I prefer the one on the end to either of the others. By the time this one is modified, it should sound pretty similar as well. But yeah, that gives us an overview of what the Gibson Falcon is like when it's a stock amplifier versus when it's done a few tasteful modifications. Let's actually try the one with the original speaker. Let's crank it up and see what kind of cranked tone we can really get out of one of these things. Add a bit of reverb. Now let's try the tremolo and reverb on the stock version. And we'll crank this one up too to see what's the best tone we can get out of it stock. I have to say is the reverb actually seems a little less strong on the original version as well. I think by the time you pump up the first stage in these amplifiers, the reverb gets a little stronger too. So that's also a plus. So yeah, overall, a few tasteful modifications on a Gibson Falcon from the 1960s, and you can make it into one kick-ass amplifier, so don't give up on them. Thanks for sticking around for this video. If you like this video and its content, please subscribe so you can keep up with us for videos like this in the future, and take care, y'all.